will need to, this application will need to be held until next month because we do not have the report from the DEP. Elizabeth, I see you're here. Would you like to give us a brief description of the project?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much. I actually will have Denise Von Dassel, who's helping me with design and planning, give you a little bit more information about the specifications of the project, but generally remodel and update to the existing structure. Denise, can you help me?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Denise Von Dassel, KV Designs. Basically, what we intend to do is remove a portion of the building that includes a garage, an attached garage, and then put a partial second floor on a single story portion of the home and put a 2-story small addition on the street side of the building as well. All the proposed work, well, the entire property falls within 100 feet of the tidal wetlands. And let me see here. So that's why we are here before you. And only a very small portion, the area that's hatched, that is proposed second story addition, falls within 50 feet and just a part of that falls within the 50 feet of the tidal wetlands. The portion of the building that's going to remain will be FEMA compliant because it's currently, the garage puts it into the A zone, and we are taking it out of, by removing the garage, we take it out and the whole house becomes part of the within the X flood zone. And let's see what else. We meet all zoning criteria, setbacks, coverages, and all of that. So primarily the reason, again, just to reiterate, that we're here is because the entire property falls within the 100 feet of tidal wetlands. But the work that we're proposing is very, I would say, minor. Oh shoot. I don't have the exact number of square feet, but it's, let's see, proposed 85 square foot addition on one side, a 40 square foot porch addition. We're removing 330 square foot garage. We are removing a 25 square foot porch, 152 square foot deck. We're adding a small little landing outside a proposed rear door. The paved driveway, 740 square feet, will remain. The total ground coverage goes from 16.7% to, I'm sorry, I apologize, hold on a second. The total ground coverage goes, remains about 8%, 2313 to 2313. I think I better check that. I think we're reducing the ground coverage. We are significantly reducing any runoff area and impervious areas as well. Let's see, building height. Coverage. Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, that's an overview if anybody has questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
As I
already have the motion on the table.
we have a motion, but I was letting them discuss since they had the audio issues. We have a motion on the floor to receive and table this until next month when we'll have the DEP comment. Is there any discussion or questions from the commission members at this time? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed? Abstaining, motion carries. Thank you.
Eddie was the one that seconded it. Who was the one that made it?
I did.
Bo
Thank
made
you.
it. Okay, thank you. We move on to 4B, which is Planning and Zoning Commission 23-25. It's also a CAM application to demolish an existing house and rebuild a new house meeting zoning requirements and FEMA requirements at 35 Shore Road. The owners are Michael and Sherry Ferrara. The agent is Greg Pettis. Again, this application, we're waiting to receive the CAM comments from Deep, so we can only receive this tonight. Is there an owner applicant available to speak that would like to speak? Greg?
Yes, good evening, Greg Fettis with Fettis Engineering. Just a brief overview. I guess we'll be back next month, but tearing down a house that's in pretty rough shape, basically replacing in the same location, meeting FEMA requirements, moving the garage from the side entrance to the roadside entrance, which will actually allow a little bit higher garage floor. We're meeting all the zoning requirements, coverage, setbacks, floor area. So it's otherwise, I guess, would be before ZBA doing this. So just here before you for the CAM. We do have a relatively positive letter from the town engineer, which we've addressed in a response letter. And again, just waiting for the deep comments.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive?
I make the motion.
Jay, you're not seated.
Oh, okay.
I'll move to
Mike
receive
Floyd will be the
and
motion to receive.
postpone
Okay. No, Ellen.
I'll move to receive and postpone until the November meeting.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, that was Mike, I think.
Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion? In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next month.
Take care, Greg.
Thank you.
Let's see, application reviews. We have two that are available for tonight, both from both been previously closed public hearings. So we have Planning and Zoning Commission 23-18, 345 East Main Street zoning regulation amendment to add multifamily adaptive reuse zone. This is the owner is Victorian Village, and its agent is attorney Andrea Gomes. The public hearing is closed, so we can't hear from the public or the applicant at this time. It is open for discussion. I will note that at our request, Abby had provided us two alternative motions that we can look at and utilize it depending on where we're going to go. One is to approve and the other is to deny. Again, she did this at our request, not to bias us, but to make sure that in any motion we hit the important concepts. Okay, so these, they're both available, and additional language, if there's something you think is necessary, is certainly a possibility, but a great start. Okay, so with that, is there a discussion on the regulation amendment to add multifamily adaptive reuse zones to the regulations? Bo,
I've got quite a few comments if I could.
go ahead.
First one is I'm concerned about the proposed density. The density proposed is 15 units per half an acre. And that, in my opinion, is far too dense. Using this application to land it as an example, at 1.8 acres, that would allow 54 units on 1.8 acres. Additionally, the density is expressed in units, not in bedrooms. So you could have 54, 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom units, which is far too dense, in my opinion. Ground coverage, I know the applicant said that they kept consistent with the I2 zone, which is what 75% in this zone. But if you look at strictly residential uses, which this proposed would be, the highest we go to is 30%. The average is around 20%. Again, it's far too dense in an area that's described in our plan of conservation and development as environmentally sensitive. And I'm not sure if people are aware of it, but in this area, in any place that has septic systems, should a septic system fail and no on-site solution can be found, it's incumbent on the town to find a solution for that. So it's something that's quite a concern here. When you go on to the plan of conservation and development, again, there are vague references to housing and that sort of thing, but there are specific references that make this inconsistent. On page 13, second paragraph, last sentence, we envision a Clinton that focuses on mixed uses and commercial redevelopment in targeted areas along Route 1, along the Route 1 corridor that serves local and regional needs. This is not a mixed use, nor is it required in the regulation to be a mixed use. The proposed regulation is in the East End planning focus area. The first paragraph, second sentence, points out that future development is seriously limited by the environmental sensitivity in this area, as I alluded to before. And again, that goes back to the proposed or the allowed density. In the first paragraph, the third sentence, development in this area should focus on creation of a gateway to Clinton from Westbrook along Route 1, including replacement of renovation of existing commercial buildings. We're not renovating any existing commercial buildings, so it doesn't need that. On page 59, I think it's page number 3, vision, under the title vision, issues and outlook. The entire section does not mention residential uses in this area. On page 62, item 6, number 6, specific actions. These are bullet points highlighted and pointed out clearly should be priorities. The 6th bullet point says specifically denotes that residential use not fronting Route 1. It's quite clear that this is inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development. And I'd like to go back to, at a prior meeting, one of our colleagues pointed out that we allow floating zones within our regulations. That's not really an accurate statement. The statement reads that we may allow for. If we allowed them, it would read we shall allow for. This just really highlights what the law allows us to do anyway, to consider floating zones. It does not say that we necessarily approve them within our regulations. In section 29, we should note that this particular, now I'm going on to the landing of the zone. This is a non-conforming use, existing non-conforming use. Section 29.3.1 of our regulations that this commission has. No non-conforming use shall be enlarged or non-conforming use of land, buildings, or other structures, portion thereof. If we adopt this and land it on this particular site, we'd be creating a mechanism to circumvent our own regulation.
Let's stick with the first one.
Okay.
You can come back to the landing in a second. I'd like to take them one at a time.
Yeah.
Ellen.
But just as a point of order here, if 2318 fails, 2319 is removed from
Dead
the
in the
agenda,
water.
or?
Well, no, we have a motion to turn it down because the first one failed.
Okay, all right. My objection to this is a little bit more basic than the detail that Bo has gone into. But I recognize that our regulations do indeed provide for floating zones. I believe that the incorporation of that into our regulations was a mistake in the first place. One of my colleagues has pointed out in our prior discussion of this that, well, why didn't we change it? It hasn't been changed because, we have not had a full-time planner for close to 10 years. We're addressing a lot of the inconsistencies in our regulations at this time. Like everybody else in the world, we were a lot of our activities toned down during the COVID era. We're coming up to POCD revision, and that kind of forms the basis for rewriting of zoning regs at that time. So yes, it probably should have addressed removing this, but or at least discussed it. We haven't. But I think that floating zones are an exceptionally bad planning tool, and that it's not something that we should be expanding the use of in any way. Floating zones, they undermine people's ability to rely upon the predictability of the zoning map that exists, and people make decisions to purchase property, to sell property, to develop property, to improve property, based upon the existing map. And a floating zone is a way to essentially undermine that. The legal history of floating zones was that it was a mechanism developed to kind of get around the standing issue for people who had, who might be suing. There's no abutting property if you approve a floating zone. It's only when you land it that you have people who have the standing to sue on that basis. And it was kind of a legal wiggle. So I object. These folks could be planning to build the Taj Mahal there or some landmark or whatever. It has nothing to do with the specific a proposal that's in front of us. Frankly, the proposal sounds like an improvement over what's there, but the legal mechanism undermining it, the use of this floating zone, is something that I just think of as a bad component of our regulations, and I don't support expanding its use in any way.
Thank you. I'll come back to you. Well, Martin, go ahead.
A couple of points. I personally don't have a problem with floating zone. They've been around for 70 or 80 years in zoning history. The intent is to be aspirational. In other words, the community decides what it wants in a particular zone, and then an applicant wants the property rezoned to that particular floating zone. So the aspirational elements land on a particular parcel of land. The way most communities deal with this is through a planned development ordinance, where where you don't have the prescriptive standards out front in terms of floating zone. Is handled through a negotiated process through a planned development. We don't have planned development provisions in our ordinance, so this is the closest thing you're going to find to it. There are a number of problems. I agree with everything Bo said. There are some additional problems with this, one of which is what it purports, the benefits it purports to give us is affordable housing. And it does this by a 15% set aside. Now, if you look at state policy for affordable housing, the state is trying to encourage 30% set aside, 15% below 80%, 15% below 60% of average household income. This, in terms of being an aspirational zoning provision, doesn't even aspire to what the current state policy is. It's half of the state policy. So it's providing half the affordable housing that the state would like to see occur. That's one issue. The other issue is even within the state affordable housing statute, there's an exception for putting affordable housing in industrial areas. So this is an industrial area. And part of the reason why they do that, I think, although I haven't looked at the legislative history, is they don't want to expose people to the risks associated with industrial uses. And here we have tens of thousands of gallons of explosive propane gas sitting next to what is proposed to be a 54 dwelling unit per acre.
It's not proposed to be, 50, that's.
Well,
the maximum, yeah.
within, yeah, I mean, within, a very high density. They don't want to get into the landing of it.
Right.
But certainly the policies of discouraging lower income affordable housing within industrial areas is a sound policy, and I think it's one that our own plan of conservation development actually addresses by not encouraging it, encouraging residential uses in this area. I think if in fact the policy, the benefits of this is to provide affordable housing, and Clinton needs affordable housing. There are currently 16 units of affordable housing on the property now within the motel. And what they're going to do is replace 16 units with 6 units of affordable housing, which is not a benefit or a gain within the context of this division. So I don't think we should approve this rezoning request.
Yes, I completely agree with what Bo and Martin have said. And Martin kind of covered some of the topics that I was going to cover. So, yeah, I think that the industrial zone is there for a reason and it serves a purpose for Clinton. We need to think about the fact that we only have 3 industrial zones while there are 17 zones that are open for some type of residential use. And if we think about being a gateway to Clinton from Westbrook, what we want to see there to me to boost our economy and bolster our economy in Clinton would be continue to grow businesses in that industrial area and not conflate that with creating a floating zone that then allows for more residential uses and purposes. I would also agree with Bo that the POCD lists specifically that the East End planning focus area is to encourage those residential developments in areas not fronting on Route 1. So yet again, it's going against what our own POCD is stating. And if I may, I would like to move to deny the application to PZC 2318 to amend section 21 of the Clinton zoning regulations to add section 21.3.3 multifamily adaptive reuse zone district Mars, and adopt the following findings of fact: that the application has met the notice requirements of CGS and 124(8) through 7D, and notice requirements of the Clinton zoning regulations, that the application has met the requirements of section 4.20.1 of the Clinton zoning regulations concerning application requirements for zoning text amendments. 3, the application is inconsistent with existing zoning regulations because it enables residential uses in the I2 zone district, where such uses are currently prohibited under section 27 schedule of uses by district in Clinton and zoning regulations. And the 4, the adoption of the Mars district is inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development in that it would be and that it would exacerbate existing conflicts between commercial, industrial, and residential uses identified in the East End planning focus area by introducing residential uses into land zone for industrial use. That is mine.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay.
Or a second? Okay. I would only add that I think that I want to make sure that many of the points that Bo pointed out are included in the record for it, because I think
Yes.
that was additional evidence. Any further discussion at this time?
So to make sure that the record is clear, I think it would be important to, in addition to what Chinzia just introduced, to very clearly state which section of POCD and be very clear about those findings so that it's very well connected.
I did listen.
We did, if you just, can you summarize, well, so as long as I just wanna make sure that the motion itself
Carries it.
includes those.
List has
Are you
part of
amending your
POCD
motion?
that.
Are you suggesting we amend our motion?
Yes, I
To
am.
add this.
Well, I got about the commercial property, that's what she was looking for, you know, it's not consistent with the P O C D, right?
Yes, that's what I stated, it's inconsistent.
Correct. What I was trying to make sure is that the motion read clearly in the record that the draft motion with the four conditions that Chinzia, or the four findings that Chinzia just stated, in addition to the following findings that you laid out earlier. I
And
just wanna make
Adam's
sure we have
correct. I
it.
was asking for an amendment to the motion.
I pointed out page 13, second paragraph, the last sentence. The first paragraph in the East End Planning and Focus Area, you have that, okay, first paragraph, second sentence. And in the same area, the first paragraph, third sentence. And then on page 59 under vision, issues and outlook, the entire section. And then also on page 62, item 6, number 6 under specific action items, the 6th bullet point.
Do you accept that as an amendment?
Right, and then did we want to add something?
I would mention something about not promoting the public health or safety.
Correct, with the explosives.
But that's not,
But
you
it's not
can only
that.
do that when you're landing.
When
them.
you're
It's got
landing.
nothing to do with the creation of
Okay.
the room. I don't think we can add that.
To the extent that you're proposing residential, affordable housing residential development in an industrial zone.
But
I do accept those.
those points?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
And I assume you accept the
Yes.
session? Okay. Any further discussion?
Is the
Okay,
verbiage correct now, Abby?
yep,
Yes.
okay. With that, we can have a vote. I do need to note that, based on attendance, Martin, you're not eligible. And Alan, you're not eligible.
Even if you heard the tape.
Even if you heard the tapes?
If you can say on record that he's reviewed the record
If
in
you
full.
reviewed the record, then you can be eligible.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, have you reviewed the record?
Yes.
Okay, then you're both eligible. I needed to check. Okay, with that, everybody who's here tonight is eligible to vote. So all those in favor?
Just to clarify, an I vote is a vote to deny.
Correct. All those voting to deny.
You want to take a roll call vote?
Yeah, we need a-
You want to do a roll call vote? Okay, we can do a roll call vote. Okay, I is to deny.
Ellen Dahlgren, voting aye to deny. Eddie Alvarino,
Aye to deny.
Mike Florio,
I
Martin Jaffe,
did deny.
Alan Kravitz,
I to deny.
Chinzia Lettieri,
I to deny.
Adam Moore,
Aye.
Bo Clark,
Aye.
Jay Mandel. Oh, no, can't do it.
He's not committed right now.
Yeah, okay. Zach Floor.
He's not seated either.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The motion has, or the proposal has been denied. We'll move on to, Planning and Zoning Commission 23-19 zoning map amendment to landmark. Because of that, denial, it really simplifies our life in a sense. We, cannot approve this, so the motion to deny based on the failure is the one that we will need to go with on this. So if somebody would like to make that motion, it's on page 2 of the,
I move to deny PZC 2319 to rezone the property at 345 East Main Street from industrial I2 to multifamily adaptive reduced zone district MARZ, and to adopt the following finding of fact. One application, PZC 23-18, was not approved. Therefore, the MARZ district is not included in the Clinton zoning regulations and cannot be used to rezone the property.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second that,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Okay, discussion. This one, I don't think we need a roll call on. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstaining, motion carries. Thank you. Item 5C is tabled, so we will not do that, and item 5D is tabled. So that brings us down to, item 6, which somehow got run off my agenda. There we go. What did I get for having notes? Item 6 is, administrative items. Oh, that's good. The first one is review and discussion of potential amendments to section 28 accessory uses. This one, the text amendment, the timeframes at our discretion, since it's a text amendment, does any, anybody want to give us an update on this? Abby, can you give us an update on this?
Yep. So the various pieces of section 28 have been before the commission for discussion and the regulations committee for discussion. At the last meeting of the regulations committee, we talked about these final changes and essentially folks thought it would be best to bring it back to the full commission for the beginning of consideration. We haven't advertised on this at this stage. Nothing has, been done other than the crafting of this draft. And so the question for the commission is, are folks comfortable with the language? Are there questions that people have about some of the language? We can go through the various sections. And then, what is your thinking in terms of carrying this forward for an advertised zoning text amendment? There have been some conversations in regulation committee meetings in the past about whether to take all of these together or to separate them out, because some of the issues may be more complex than others. And so we can certainly talk through, an approach. But I think one of the key pieces is to sort of say, to make sure everybody understands where we are today in terms of proposed changes and why. So I can either field questions or I can take you through it, whichever you prefer.
I would prefer you took everybody through it. So.
Okay. So as we go through, one of the key structural pieces that we tried to do in this was to clarify when various permitting levels are required. The way the regulations currently read, some things are allowed by right. However, it reads as though you're technically supposed to have a zoning permit for things that are really should just be by right without having to go through any kind of permitting process. As long as you meet the standard, you don't even need to come see us, right? So we tried to make it clear when you would need to do nothing as long as you comply, when you need to go see Kathy for a zoning permit, when you need to come to the commission for some other level of approval. So it's clear where all of these accessory uses fit. So that was so structurally, that was one of the big pieces. We then went into the various standards. And so, we tried to reorganize things like off-street parking and commercial vehicles to make sure that that was clear so that folks had the ability by zoning permit, you can get a commercial vehicle, and if you want to do more than that, you need to get a special exception for this group. And part of the reason for that was not to overrun smaller neighborhoods. Yeah.
Can I add to that, on the commercial vehicles that you're allowing the people that work at home? It says you specifically said it was single axle. Some of those trucks that, they go to work at night, remember we discussed this, have dual axles in the back because of the welding machine, the air compressor machine, and for them to be legal, like, I have several friends that work for Cherry Hill, or they work at night, they go on the highway, so they're home, they bring the truck in from out of town, and they're home, and then they have to go out on the road. But those trucks, even they have two axles in the back. Because of the weight. It's because the welding machines, the air compressor machines, and all the tools and everything, they're working on the highway, like Empire, like the paving, one of the machines will break down, the paver. They need that double axle, so that should be a consideration on the.
And then we can look at changing that language to no more than two axles or a dual rear axle, so that we're not getting into.
Right, so you need two, but those trucks, those work trucks
Mhm.
have two axles, because of the
Correct.
weight limit.
Right,
So
that's
as
what
long
you
as-
said.
Yeah, so we're okay with that? So it's 3-axle truck,
Well,
I can add whatever language, the question is,
Yeah.
is the commission okay with that?
but I'm just letting you know, they won't, they need to have the 2 axles in the back. It doesn't make them any bigger, the size can be the same, but for them to carry the weight, if not, they only can carry 4,500 pounds, and that's overweight, to be overweight.
some of that we need to discuss, once we're, in public hearing with
Okay,
this.
but I'm just saying, that's a fact, so if you're allowing trucks, because we just talked about people working at night, they're coming home, they have a double axle on the back. And that's for the weight,
Thank you.
I'm just, I know for a fact, so. Thank you.
Okay, so that I've got that noted. So, so again, this is, we also tried to add in off-street parking for up to 2 trailers that have beds under 12 feet. Just as of right, just go ahead and park them. We don't want to be sort of necessarily getting into a zoning permit for every single person who parks a trailer on the property, as long as they're under a certain size. And that was really the key here, was trying to limit size and trying to limit it in a way that was measurable to the zoning enforcement officer, so that when she goes out, she can take a tape and pull, hub to hub or whatever that is. So we know it with very concrete terms. So it's not, there's no guessing game for us. There's no guessing game for the folks who need to park. So that was the vehicle piece. And again, in a lot of these pieces, you'll see, again, permitted as of right, permitted by zoning permit. So I won't go through all of those. The keeping of livestock as an accessory use, again, we had added in that element for the companion animals. I know, a very strong piece, but we tried to keep it very clearly tied to the size of the animal. Again, that's measurable, that's kind of geared toward specific species, that are, smaller than currently my dog. Again, yeah, so we did that. We modified a little bit storage of travel trailers and campers, so that folks have the ability to store within 5 feet of a lot line, permitted by right, and you still can't store them in the front yard. So as long as you're not doing that, you're in good shape. Minor language cleanups. We tried to clarify storage trailers, and we have at least one enforcement issue with this currently. So if somebody's bringing in pods or a roll off or something, if they're remodeling, if they're doing some kind of work, we essentially say that, you can do that, and you can have a longer term to have those kinds of things, because currently you're not really supposed to have those without permitting. You can have them for up to a month in any calendar year, or during the length of your building permit. And then within 2 weeks of your building permit being officially closed out, your certificate of completion or occupancy, then you take them out. So it's, again, a measurable way for us to say when they're supposed to go, but we give folks the benefit of being able to work on their properties. Let's see. Some of this stuff, we added incidental office use to retail, for, again, this sort of accessory to the main use of a property. Whatever.
And that was without requiring a permit.
Right. We try to keep that fairly straightforward. Again, where a retail use has been established and meets, section 27, we added in manufacturer assembly, consumption and demonstration of goods to be sold on the premises. And what we're finding from some of the retailers is they need to be a little bit more creative in getting folks in. And so whether that is testing things out, showing folks how they make what they make, if they're doing some kind of very simple, I paint the pottery that I sell up front, or that kind of thing, they're able to do that. So full disclosure, one of the groups that could take advantage of this, if somebody is opening up a tobacco shop, they could have a smoke lounge in the back that is a demonstration or consumption area for product. Same thing if somebody had a retail, they made jams and that kind of stuff, and they were selling that up front, and they wanted to have bread that you can go try things out and kind of have tea in the back or something like that. That kind of a thing could be permissible. So I just want to make sure people are clear, because that one is, you do introduce, they have to be subordinate, they have to be clearly incidental to the main retail use, but it is something new that you need to be aware of. So that's important. So there's those pieces. storage, we just tried to clarify, making sure that the various zone districts were included in outside storage. So that was important, and that we are looking at site plans for outside storage so that you have a chance to make sure that things are properly screened and all that kind of stuff. We had gone through out the events permitting, and so when we had changed the vendor permits in section 14 previously, this is sort of the follow-up companion regulation to make sure that it's in line with that section in those amendments. And this is where instead of every single vendor for a particular event having to come to our office ad nauseum to get a zoning permit, this is the consolidated single permit that they get for those. We also said except for events sponsored by the town of Clinton, because there's so many of them occurring on town property in partnership with the town, and it's the same event every year. The vendors go to the same place, the dunk tank is exactly in the same spot. And so for those kinds of things where, because the purpose of the permitting is really to make sure emergency management and other folks are keyed into this, where those folks are already involved, there's not as much of a need for permitting. So we did exempt the town there, so it's something to consider. Healthcare structures, we tried to leave mostly alone. We did add the language in residential and village zone districts. So where single family residential is allowable, then we put it in.
God bless you.
Bless you. Home occupations, we made a change to tier 1. So there's 3 tiers in our home occupations, and depending on how intense they are, they go before either zoning or the zoning official, or they go to the full commission. And so one of the things that we tried to do here was make it a little bit simpler for home occupations. So if you're not necessarily doing anything that is going to harm your neighbors, do we need you to come in? You're already registering your business. Do we need you, as long as you comply and are not causing any harm and essentially function as a single family home or a single dwelling unit, do we need a permit for you?
Does that include, excuse me, Anthony, does that include signage?
So for signage, you have a maximum of 5 square feet. So we would essentially say that, the home occupation, you would still need a sign permit for your sign, because
Correct.
this doesn't change that section of the regulations. But it would essentially say if you are, occupying, up to 25% of your building and things are happening inside, there's no noise, vibration, any of that kind of stuff. What we're saying is you may be able to do this without coming even for a zoning permit. And that's an important question that I think this group needs to answer is, are you comfortable with that? Or do you want to still see folks coming in with?
The only thing I'm concerned about is they have their a seamstress. She's only using a small part. Is she allowed to hang a sign on her house?
She would have to get a permit, and it couldn't be more than 5 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, the content of these didn't really change, with the exception of if there were something going through, there's special events that are allowable in the current home occupations. And so the ones for tier 1 in that potentially by right not needing a zoning permit category went from 6 events to 3 events. Again, because without sort of the zoning approval and stuff, trying to keep that to sort of a minimum. So that's something I just wanted to flag for you, whether or not folks are comfortable with this.
Yeah, I just have one comment about the home occupations. We don't specifically address music lessons. You do talk about offensive noise, and I guess some people would put any middle school trombone student in that category.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
I just wonder if we need to call that out in any way.
Where would you draw the line though?
Yeah,
What about
I-
blacksmith?
Yeah. Blacksmith.
Yeah,
You know, what about?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think if there are going to be more people doing music lessons at home, I mean, it's just my experience that a lot of the complaints tend to be the music lessons.
And the hard thing with noise
Sorry.
violins are rough in the early stages. Like,
People are terrible for beginners.
Oh, God, go ahead.
well, I think noise is tough in general, because the offensive component of this, we can link things to decibel levels, and you have to have a sound meter and somebody qualified to read and take that
It's
sound.
very,
reading.
very difficult.
It's a hard one to do. So, noise and light are the 2 most difficult ones to manage.
Right.
So we didn't take it out here. I think section 31 performance standards, when we get to that section, is probably a good place to have a conversation about where something crosses the line. If somebody has a relatively soundproof accessory building and they're, you know, they've got a piano and they bring their folks in for, you know, lessons out in the back. And it's insulated and you don't really hear it, that maybe the music lesson isn't the thing to go after, but I understand that
It's
the
different,
concept of
you know,
noise.
If you're in a condo, obviously, it's completely different, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. So I just, in my experience, that's where the complaints come, is with music lessons. and so.
We will make sure that her house has nobody with music.
Okay, so. Let's see, you still have a couple of.
Yeah, and so the
The
last
swimming
one,
pools, waiting for that one.
swimming pools,
It's in there, swimming pools,
zoning permit, right? Essentially zoning compliance.
let's talk about that.
That's really it.
Okay, so, on the swimming pools, we should make that, I mean, as of right, we fought beavers and all that, and now it's an as of right, but if you own your own home, if you own a home. And you can't have a pool, because if you should make the setbacks a little different, like the I-80, the R-80 is, you're looking at 50 feet. And then 50 feet and 50 feet, it's like a 2 acre, but people that are on a 1 acre lot or 0.75 lot should be able to come, a pool, they should be able to have a pool. You know, without, they should come in within maybe 10 feet of the side and a 25 and a 25. So they have a pool app. I mean, it's a pool. I mean, it's not, I mean, it's.
I still think they have to demonstrate that it's within the setbacks.
That's what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chairman. I mean, there's people that in this town that want pools. And for the pools, and I know this for a fact, and I can prove it, these people had to take up their driveway, ripped out their driveway. Think about this for a minute. Rip out a driveway, rip out a porch, and rip out the back deck, gone, so they could have a pool for their kids. Why do they have to do all that? For something that's, you know, it's not impervious, it's pervious, it's water. You know what I mean? It's a pool.
It's impervious.
Water doesn't go in the ground.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, no, I'm saying, but the water goes in, it's not gonna go anywhere, it goes into your pool, you know what I mean? But the driveway,
It's impervious.
yeah,
But I think what Ed's getting at is we have a separate standard, I think, for sheds, it's within 10 feet or something.
yeah, I mean,
And I think Ed is saying that we should have something.
we should have something
just
for these
pools
people.
At a more moderate rate.
Why, I know for a fact that 2 homes had to rip up their driveway. Mark, I'm just saying, you want a pool for your grandkids, I don't know if you have grandkids. So you're running short, so you have to rip up your driveway, take down your deck that's on 4 posts, rip it down, because it's happened lately in our town. And I can take you to these houses. So why can't these people, if we could put a shed on the property, and I know this for a fact, and then they put wheels underneath it, and then nobody did anything about it. So the shed, the guy put on his property, and he's got actual wheels, because it says in the guidelines, as long as the shed is on wheels. And the guy laid the wheels down, the shed's there, I'll bring you pictures. And that shed is there right now. So why can't the people that own a pool and their house, they're paying taxes, can have a pool? Why do they have to rip down a porch? Why do they have to rip up a driveway to have?
Well, I think they could also try to design it so that it doesn't.
I think there's actually 2 issues here.
I'm serious.
I think there's actually 2 issues here. One, I agree with Eddie completely about setbacks, because, you know, that's, we allow sheds, you know, within, I think it's 10 feet, but I have to look again. But that seems to make sense for a pool. But the other issue is ground coverage. And a pool should count as ground coverage.
Right.
Because it is an impervious surface. So I think there are
It is
2
impervious.
issues. I think that, yes, we should make an exception in the setbacks, because that just, like I said.
But I still think it needs to come before,
Yes, I would agree.
I would not make it an as of right.
No, I think it needs to be reviewed.
Why couldn't it be as of right? Why?
Because they need to demonstrate that they're still.
But what would a pool do, Mr. Chairman, if a
Well,
guy,
it's just noted, you need to deal
if
with.
somebody put a
ground coverage.
built-in pool in, I'm just,
Right.
I know 3 homes right now that are looking to put in pools.
Well, that's not relevant.
It is relevant, if you own the home that you
It is
can't
not
put a home,
relevant. What is relevant is that.
then why
we have
could
to-
people put a shed on a property? you know,
But
and
they-
right on the line, and we don't say nothing
Eddie?
about it. If it's under, what is it, how many square
So
feet?
under 200 square.
200
so
square feet.
any- Yeah, so that.
You can
that's
put a
not-
shed anywhere you want, under 200, you don't even.
Eddie, let her finish.
So I was getting, so the shed piece, the regulations specific, there's language in our regulations that say you can have those sheds with, it can go over 200 square feet. 200 square feet is the cutoff for building permit requirements.
Yeah.
Under, so over 200, you know, under 200, they don't need a building permit. They may not need as stringent, crab review for B100 days and stuff. They still have to get reviewed, but they may not need a separate permit depending on where they are. But they all get zoning review, and 5 foot is that setback area for sheds specifically.
Right,
So you could, if you were comfortable saying that a pool has no greater impact than a shed, you could add pools to that section of regulations or create another standard. And one of the reasons, you know, the pool 5 feet from the property line, you still have to have your fence for code purposes.
Right,
There's other
course.
elements that need to.
but what if you like 10 feet, and 25 feet, and
Correct,
50
yeah.
feet in front? You have, you know, I mean, think of.
Right now, they're treated as though they're
It's
the
a, it's
same
a
as
R,
that.
it's an R80 neighborhood, R80, which is a 2-acre lot, so they have the room to put a thing. But around this one particular home, it had, all the neighbors have the pools. And all the neighbors have, agreed not to, you know, fight the guy. That's just one house. I know of 3 other
Yeah,
houses.
but again, the question is, should it be,
It should be, if you have
it
a,
shouldn't be by right, it needs to be. it
you
needs to
guys
be-
wouldn't let, you guys wouldn't even discuss anything about beavers as of right. But now is it as of right that you can protect your property? Why can't people have grandchildren, you know, that have you can't have a pool? Why can't you be within 10 feet or 25 feet or
If,
you understand what I'm saying, Bo? You're a smart guy. I mean,
I completely agree with having a reduced setback for a pool, but I do think that it has to come for a permit, because there's other things.
all right, let it come
Ground
from.
coverage, you know, spare room for the septic system, there's a lot of other considerations.
But
But as far as the setbacks go,
the,
I think that should come.
one of the houses, Abby, actually, your father wrote the permit, and they had no, Pratt had no problem with this. But when it went, when it went for his permit, he had to rip out his driveway, rip out the driveway, rip down the porch to put a pool in. That to me is totally ridiculous, because now the
Well, that's
person,
their choice.
okay, so now,
But I
if
think
there's a
that's-
fire, I'm gonna
I
say.
think we need to end this discussion.
Wait a minute, Mr. Chairman,
No.
you can't
Yes,
do that all the
I
time.
can.
If there's a fire, how do people get out of the back porch? How do they get out of the house? They only have one entrance, one exit, because the
Eddie?
porch is gone now.
The
It doesn't
discussion
make
is
sense to
over.
me.
Thank you.
so I can certainly come up with suggestions for modified setbacks for pools.
Doesn't make sense.
And to go from there, and then the ground coverage element is, it sounds as though that may be staying. Again, we can modify however we want, you know, the commission has full authority to make those modifications and just tie them to findings and off we go. The setbacks, we can certainly work with, and then the question would be whether or not the commission wants to discuss a ground coverage modification, whether it would count toward ground coverage or not. I've heard some indication, no, some indication, yes. So that would just be in terms of putting together a draft, we would just want to know what the direction would be, or if you'd rather wait and discuss it as part of the final language, that's fine. But it's nice if we can put forward a final draft of the commission's proposal for public review. So that'll be something that we'll want to make sure that we settle on. The last,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
and then the last part of it is accessory dwelling units and just making sure that we are in compliance with the state legislation, since we did not opt out of those accessory dwelling unit regulations. The regulations for Clinton were crafted and adopted a little bit ahead of the state standards, and those state standards were modified slightly. So this makes sure that we are not being overly restrictive where we don't have the authority under that state legislation. So just trying to be consistent with that. And that's section 28.
Okay, so if I may, the real question that would like you to consider right now is, do we want to do this as one big piece or as multiple subunits?
I like to
Hearing the different things that have been talked about, I think multiple subunits is probably the better way to go.
I agree with
I think
you,
it's
Mr.
far
Chairman,
more efficient.
much more efficient.
Okay.
And I think that we probably could talk about the vehicles and trailers is one of those subunits. The swimming pool sounds like it's another whole subunit. Probably the home occupations has to be another whole subunit of that. Those are several that I identified as we went past on them. But so at least those three as freestanding discussion.
I just want to say, I believe this is a great commission, but the things I bring to you guys are things that people come up to me, and talk to me and discuss things. And I try to be fair and impartial, with a lot of things. I really honestly do, and I always listen to this commission. But we can't shut people off. We can't shut ideas off. Everybody should be able to contribute and bring things to the commission. You know what I mean? I mean, Bo and Cynthia, they brought great things to the commission, about the Mars and, everybody, Martin, so I want, if people bring things to us, that's our job to help this town grow and change regulations. That's what I want.
But you were getting to the point where you were repeating yourself.
Well, that's my personality, Mr. Chairman. That's my personality. I'm sorry. That's the way I am. I can't change. I'm too old. So, but I appreciate everybody's, I care for everybody on this commission. I really do.
Okay. Did you, Abby, identify any other kind of subgroups of those regs that?
No, I mean, I would imagine anything that affects sort of minor things relative to single, I mean, home occupations could potentially go with livestock kind of things, but again, most of those are gonna be, a companion animal for somebody in a residential zone, so we may have sort of maybe the more.
So we're gonna put the whole occupations of the companion animals together?
I mean, I'm trying to find ways to not have 75 advertisements for the commission amending section 28 and make it clear for folks, and so if we're grouping, or
You just hate to get to the point where people have to vote against, what they want. What they
Right,
support, because there's one thing that was thrown in with it that they can't support, that kind of thing, yeah.
I mean, some of these things, what we could do, we could put like livestock in with the categorization of levels of permitting and stuff. I said that personally, the livestock thing is a fairly minor issue. Now, I don't know if that's gonna blow up later. It's gonna become a huge issue. I don't know. But again, I think, one amendment sort of deals with the way in which all of the various pieces are permitted and making sure that folks are clear on that, because there's some things that the only thing that changed was adding the language permitted by right, permitted by site plan. And so sort of this just administrative cleanup items, I think would be one. And then then we'll divide it out into vehicles and trailers, pools, on its own. If you want home occupations on its own, we could do retail event kind of stuff and put in those two sections together if you want to, or we can take them all individually. I mean, we certainly can do that, do an administrative one, and then any substantive change, just do its own. It's truly up to the commission how we do that. There's just a lot of them.
I
So each
prefer to
one
have
comes with an application and a notice and a cost for that notice?
Sure is.
You can't notice them all at once.
If they're separate
Okay.
processes and we're taking them up individually, then each change stands alone and we wind up advertising for each of those things. If we said we are going to be making amendments to section 28, they are divided out and presented. The challenge would then be if some things are modified and some things are not, we would need to make really clear findings to say that the vote is for this section, the following vote, for this section, the following vote. We'd have to start to individually during presentation and deliberations.
So the trade-off is whether we pay extra to advertise or whether we have to do a lot more work when we're actually enacting the changes.
Right, and I think some of it is how involved and how concerned are the public with these changes, and what is either contentious or not. And then, how much consensus is there on the commission that these are the changes that you are putting forward and would like to see with public input to make your final decision, right? So I think
the most clear way we can do it.
I think it would be the most simple for folks, and then we can put together the staff memo that says, here are the highlight issues, folks, in each of these sections that are changing and that you need to see. Here's the red line copy, and we do a really good job of making the public presentation for that. But I think in order to do it that way, it's important that the commission have some kind of consensus that this is the draft you want to see go forward. And so because you're not on any particular time frame, there's no impetus to do this other than there's, staff had some changes that we thought were necessary and commission members had some changes that they thought were necessary. So we could take another meeting and go through this current draft, since this is the first time you're really seeing it in more detail prior to getting to the point where we're ready to put a formal application, I put in quotes because of the commission action, but go through the formal process of advertising and follow that piece of it. So that's up to this group to kind of guide us.
That would be my,
So that would be one more reg commission meeting,
right,
and that would be on November what?
So right now it's scheduled for November 2nd. The question is, is it for the regulations committee, or would you like to take time during a regular meeting to hammer these out as a full group?
I would prefer to do it in a regular meeting, but I'll defer to my colleagues.
The regulations committee already went through this and produced this, so what are we gonna do? Look at it again?
Okay.
Brought here to the whole commission for input. And,
Usually just add a nine at the Regs committee.
Okay. Well, so you would prefer that we just hammer it out here, or?
I think so. I mean, like Eddie had some comments about frogs. And
Right,
we're
and
gonna,
you took notes on Eddie's comments, yeah.
And you had some comments too, so.
As of right
You did a
now.
great job at it.
Yeah.
You
No, I
guys
think
all
it did.
great
And
place.
this is all the committee kind of.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
I think everybody's gotta read it, right?
Right.
Come to the next
Yeah.
meeting with comments.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
We'll do that.
I read everything you sent, that's why I knew about everything that was going on there. I said, oh, I didn't. I
Okay.
see nothing.
And so we're gonna do this one in the context of the regular meeting in November, which is fairly light. We just have those two coastal site plans as far as we're here right now. We can also talk about this next one on family childcare and whether or not you want to have a regulations committee meeting, or whether or not for next month, we're just kind of keeping things in with the full.
Is it mandated by the state?
Yeah.
What are we gonna discuss?
Yeah. Yeah, that one, I didn't remember us doing the second.
We have not. This is one, this actually, I mean, it kind of took the planning world a little bit by surprise. This is June legislation that went into effect, and all of a sudden planners start reading things over the course of the summer. And at the end of actually last month, there was a letter sent to all of the municipal heads, whether it's first selectmen, town managers, that kind of stuff, to say, hey, reminder, everybody, this legislation that passed a couple months ago, you have to demonstrate compliance or tell us how you are going to become compliant by December 1st. So it wasn't one that was really even on the radar, I think, by the Planning Association in the state. It was a little bit of a, whoa, okay. So it's, again, it's not,
Okay, so it's not that I missed it.
no.
Okay.
This was a little bit of a quiet adoption at the end of the session. So it's essentially, the proposed language would bring us into compliance, and whether folks, and the question is, you can certainly go through those elements in here.
So then we're just voting on it, right?
Correct, and if it really, the question is, does anybody have any additions, questions, things you want to discuss about the proposed changes to essentially remove the special exception criteria, and make sure that we're permitting by right, family childcare operations and group childcare homes as defined by the state. So we would modify our definitions to be consistent with the state definitions, because right now they are not. And then make sure that all of the various sections where these references occur in the regulations are clear, that we're not treating family childcare homes and group childcare homes differently from, sort of how we're permitting single family uses. So you've got to come in for your zoning permit. You still have to go through that exercise, but nothing is prohibited. Nothing is done by special exception for those two categories. Childcare centers, larger stuff, still has to come forward for a special exception. This doesn't touch adult daycare. So it really is just those two categories.
Yeah, unless somebody objects, I think we should hold that for next month and pound it out here.
Just advertise that one.
You want to have, you think it's ready?
We
to
can
have?
however you want to go forward. I mean, all we need to do by December 1st is say, here's our time frame to come into compliance. So if we're not strictly done by December, as long as we're on the path and we report that back to OPM, I'm fine.
That mandatory training that you sent out to everybody, right? Does everybody, if they're taking the people, so.
Oh, separate, so separately, yeah, there's certainly training opportunities for folks who have not by the end of this year.
This is
completed
for the
their course.
affordable housing.
Yeah.
And that'll cover you. I'm going the 26th, I believe. Yeah.
So just getting back to this, would people be comfortable, since this is a mandate, going ahead and
Yeah.
moving forward with advertising it?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's where we're at. We'll do that into. Okay, is there any other business tonight?
I'd just like to mention something. I know we didn't land the Mars zone, but I'd like to point out that if we had even landed that zone, it would have been illegal to put it on that spot. And I'll read that this was 8-2M is the statute that allows this. And 8-2M has a weird language. It actually only applies to the city of New Haven. But it goes on to say you can't inform it, but it was codified by Public Act 06-128. And in the bottom of when you read that Public Act, and it goes on how you can apply flexible zoning districts. The flexible zoning district regulations must not allow anyone to expand a pre-existing non-conforming use. It would have been illegal to land it at this spot. So even if we had gotten to that point,
If you land it, it changes the use.
but you can't do it that way. You can't change the zone when it affects this. You have to establish the regulations.
Well, what's the point of
Yeah.
having a floating zone if you're not changing the use?
You're changing the use, though.
You can change the use, but you can't expand an existing non-conforming use. So you could change the use to allow, a school in there, for instance, or a hospital, for instance. But you can't not allow it to expand an existing non-conforming use. Right here.
Is it an?
But it's not non-conforming if the use is changed.
Right,
But you can't use that as a method to circumvent the regulation, is what I'm saying. Says this act allows municipalities meeting very narrow criteria to adopt specific zoning regulatory techniques. Its authorization applies to municipalities exercising zoning powers under a special act. And this goes on to talk about New Haven, which is, a different thing. The latter include planned development districts, planned development units, special design districts, and planned area developments. Municipality that chooses to adopt these techniques must do so under zoning regulations and comply to the act's restrictions. A municipality zoning regulations must establish regulatory standards for floating and overlay zones and flexible districts, which this did.
that would do that.
Which
yeah.
it did. Flexible zoning districts must benefit municipality if it's a floating or overlay zone and the neighborhoods in which the districts are located. Flexible zoning district regulations may establish a zone for existing residential neighborhoods, but the new zones requirements must be at least as restrictive as underlying zones. The flexible zoning district regulation, so if you're gonna propose this regulation, the regulation must not allow anyone to expand a pre-existing non-conforming use. So you could not pass that regulation and land it there. You can't do it. It's illegal.
But luckily the point's moved.
Yes.
Yes,
And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
okay. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Did 8:17. You gonna hold me? You ready?